listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Oh.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Stranger Things 2, or Stranger Things Season 2. The titles, I think, on it just say Stranger Things 2, kind of like a sequel. But it is the second season of the show, so I'm not sure what the preferred nomenclature is at this point, or if it matters. But that's the main thing we'll be discussing, is the second season of Stranger Things, which was available on Netflix starting a while back, in October 27th, I believe, on a Friday.
Yeah.
And I would assume most people at this point who are really into it have probably watched it all, because there was 9 episodes, and everyone's talking about it, and you have to watch it quickly before you start seeing spoilers everywhere.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about any sort of media now. Like, even Thor, I haven't seen it. You haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen people say, like, you know, apparently there's a cool cameo in it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't want to spoil anything about these movies. Like, it just came out.
Yeah.
Normally, I would have seen something on, on opening weekend, but, you get busy. You got stuff going on. It's just a bummer that some of that stuff gets ruined by people that can't, see this stuff the moment it's released.
I mean, and something too, like, so a 9-episode TV series on Netflix where they drop every single episode at once. I mean, if you have a job and you have things going in your life, you may not be able to watch 9 hours of content in the course of 1 or 2 days. And then there were people dropping things that were spoilers within like 12 hours. So like some people from within 12 hours of being released watch the entire thing straight. And it's like, I get that you love it and the properties and everything like that, but you got to give it a little bit of time for spoilers, and you can't assume that everybody has time to see something the exact second it becomes available. But so when we discuss the season 2, we'll go through the entire season and include spoilers. So if you haven't watched it, you want to skip it on that. But before we get to that, we'll go through a little bit of recent news and things we've been watching. With recent news, it feels kind of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf with all this Halloween reboot stuff. But John Carpenter is on record as saying that the new one will be the final movie in the series, which I'll believe. I don't know. If it does poorly, then I'll believe that. If it does really well, then I don't know that they won't try to milk the property in some other way. I mean, maybe it will be the last one.
So who actually owns it right now?
I'm not sure. Isn't it the Akkad family?
Yeah, I guess. So they actually own it. So they're basically just Blumhouse is licensing that from them. Is that how that's working?
Because whatever deal that originally was existing, I'm not sure about the legalese on that. Like whatever studio deal they had expired, and then they tried to find a new studio. So then they got the co-producing deal with Blumhouse.
If they own it, chances are it won't be the last one. If this one does well,
I could see it
even if it's not
being-
Blumhouse that makes another one or Carpenter involved.
I could see it being the last Michael Myers film.
Yeah.
Which, because I think that Halloween 3 has a much better reputation now than it did upon release. And a lot of people like that one the most out of all the sequels at this point in time. That wasn't the case when it came out, or at least the general opinion has shifted where more people think is at least one of the better sequels. And if they, after the success of Halloween, if the new one coming out, if it's just called Halloween, which I think it is as of right now, which is slightly confusing that you'll have had, like we've said before, multiple movies. You have Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween, where it just was Halloween 2007, and this was supposed to be Halloween 2018.
You would think they would have some sort of little subtitle on there.
And, or it could be Halloween, forget everything but the first one. And then that's the subtitle. But I would imagine if it does well enough, the name is a holiday, Halloween. And I think it'd be hard to let that entire, name and everything die down. Maybe it would be the last movie, but instead they try to do a TV series or, some alternate universe properties or anthologies.
And I'm not saying it's even going to be, it could be the last one for well over a decade, but I would almost expect before our lifetime's over, we would see another Halloween in some shape or fashion.
See, they should have just called it H40 and then ignored Halloween H20 and then just came back with it. So As of right now, it sounds from John Carpenter as if it will be likely the last one, but who knows? And I think we mentioned before, it ignores everything but the first film, which is slightly confusing to some people because I don't understand why you would negate. I guess you would negate the second film because it reveals their siblings. Mm-hmm. But even then, that feels like such an ingrained part of that franchise, since that was only the second film that established that. I get thinking it was a mistake and wanting to retcon that, but like Neil Blomkamp, when he was trying to do an Alien film, was going to retcon Alien 3 and 4, and it's like, I mean, you can.
They're doing that with the new Terminator as well. Only 1 and 2.
But with Terminators,
it sort of makes
having a time travel element to it, or if you have alternate realities, whatever, that is easier to wipe away things that have happened. But for a series that was essentially just a guy in a mask stalking teenagers to have complicated string theory and multiple parallel universes and some David Lynch type stuff going on, I mean, maybe that's the real thing. It's like just an alternate universe. And they went through the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks.
Or it's John Carpenter's final revenge, basically. You know what I mean? Like how he was involved in 2 and 3, but after that he was like wiped his hands clean. So maybe it's him being like, okay, you know what? Actually, no. We just get one and then this one, and that's it.
Yeah, he's like, we're gonna bury this thing, and get rid of it. So. Well,
box sets are going to be weird if they're ever able to make one that's, you know what I mean? Like,
so you have the box set that's got 1 and 2, and then you got a box set that's got just like in the box you'd have 1 and 2, and then 3 in like separate cases, and then in a separate case you have 4, 5, and 6, and then you would have a separate case that has H2O and Resurrection, and then a separate case that has Rob Zombie's Halloween and his remake, and then a separate case for Halloween 2018.
Or they just like really go for it and they release a box set that says Halloween the Complete Collection, and it's just 1 and 1 and the most recent ones. So you said that's the only one that matters now.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a convoluted mess, and I know that like Danielle Harris, who was Jamie in Halloween 4 and 5. It's a since deleted either tweet or Instagram post where it was her and Tyler Mane and Scout Taylor Compton, who were in the Rob Zombie remake. They said, what do we think of the new movie or something to that effect? It was all them giving the middle finger
with like smiley faces over their fingers.
Yeah.
It's like you know, obviously I think that was like lighthearted, like, well,
like, but was it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I don't see how they would expect to automatically be
the only thing I can see.
It's been how long since Rob Zombie's Halloween?
I mean, it was 2007 and 2009, so it's been like when the new one comes out, it'll been 11 years, and since the 2007.
And I know
one.
she has a larger history, with it, but still,
and she was in 4 and 5. Like, I guess too, she could be upset that they're gonna if they give Jamie Lee Curtis's character a daughter and it's someone not her. But if they're wiping that entire continuity, it'd just be more confusing, I think, to have people in there. I don't know. But I think it's shooting now, or it has been. So as more information comes out, we will.
That's exciting that it's shooting now. I didn't know that.
Oh, I think they've been shooting it now.
I'm excited for this movie. I'm pretty damn excited. Like, slashers, I liked them a lot when I was a kid. It wasn't like my favorite thing ever, but I did like watch, rent Friday the 13th. I didn't dig into Halloween as far as renting those films. I just saw some of them on TV. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and just, any of the oddball ones sometimes. But, I've almost soured on them a little bit in recent years, especially us having to watch them for the podcast. Like, when it feels like work and you're watching bad slashers.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's harder to digest if you're just kind of doing something for fun and you think, oh, I'm going to turn this off. It's no good. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've sat through a lot of bad slashers, and so almost my opinion on them is kind of, I don't know. I almost look down on them more than I used to. I hate to say that at all, but I'm like extremely excited for this film.
Yeah. I mean, just the fact that it's coming from a creative team that's more known for dark comedy and humor and things like that. Like, I think that's a refreshing viewpoint to get it from versus just, the run of the mill slasher type stuff. I mean, in terms of other recent news about creators returning to properties, it sounds like if Ridley Scott does another Alien film, there'll be no xenomorphs in it. I'm not very confident they're going to make another movie in those series.
And does that mean he's getting rid of the quote-unquote slasher or monster element? Or is it just going to be a new creature and they're still going to keep those
Well, I think he's more interested in the Android aspect of it. But then I would say, well, you've already got Blade Runner 2049 that covers all that same ground. So what's the point? And you got these prior, Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I don't think people want to see more of Michael Fassbender, regardless of how good of an actor he is.
It must be a little frustrating for Ridley Scott, considering Blade Runner 2049. It seemed like Denis Villeneuve. Denny V seemed like he was able to do a lot of what he wanted to do with that film.
Yeah.
And it's not. Granted, it is the only sequel to that original film, but even still, the name isn't as big as Alien. I don't think, as far as what they probably expected out of the box office. Obviously, they threw a lot of money at it, like a ton of money, but Ridley Scott almost seems like he had his hands tied more with this new Alien film, and he was kind of forced into a corner maybe to include more of the stuff that he didn't want to actually do. So it might be frustrating for him to see, okay, well, Denny V got to do what he wanted to do and made this very critically successful film. With me, I get panned a little bit because I was forced to do something actually I didn't really want to do, if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how all of it turns out, but
I hope he gets to make the film he wants to make, because he's a very talented filmmaker still. Like The Martian, that was a great film. I like Prometheus a lot. I don't think it was a perfect film, but there's a lot of shining moments in that film.
I enjoyed Prometheus as well. They also did that like Exodus Gods and Kings movie that was a big bomb.
But
and things.
People said, did they say that's kind of crazy and awesome on one level? I don't know if it's ironically, but
there's also the other one that was
Kingdom of Heaven.
Well, Kingdom of Heaven was one where the director's cut was good.
Supposed to be awesome.
Exodus Gods and Kings, I didn't hear much about it aside from Ridley Scott making comments about like when they asked him why for these different roles, which were Egyptians or different nationalities, why they cast like Christian Bale and somebody else. He's like, well, if you cast Muhammad, whoever or whatever, nobody knows who that is or cares. So you got to get names that will sell tickets.
Not the most PC answer. I get where he's coming from, because that's probably what the conversation they had with the studio, saying, hey, we need a face that people know if we're spending this money on it.
But I think that in recent years has been proven that doesn't matter because big name franchises with name actors flop all the time.
Yeah, it's the as it's been pointed out, the kind of the superstar celebrities are not what they once were. People say like there's only a few bankable stars, and are they even bankable anymore? Like Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
That's even in question.
Because his recent movie American Made didn't even make $50 million in the U.S. so far. I think.
Yeah. So it's almost like that's the bankable element now is not the recognizable face. It is the recognizable superhero mask.
Well, and some people are only bankable in certain franchises. They're not really bankable in general. Like Vin Diesel can't open a movie to save his life unless it's Fast and Furious. Yeah. Because all those other movies kind of flop. But
they looked, let's see, what do we have? Was it The Pacifier? What was it where he's the babysitter or a fairy or something?
There's one where he's like a Navy SEAL or something.
And then The Last Witch Hunter, so maybe not the most.
And then the Riddick movies.
Yeah.
So Pitch Black was like a decent enough kind of like B, sci-fi horror film. And then The Chronicles of Riddick was kind of wanting to be a space opera mixed with fantasy, sci-fi, epic story. So it's kind of like Star Wars mixed with Lord of the Rings. And I think it kind of missed the mark. And then the newer movie was a bit more pared down, and I haven't seen it. Just the one that was called Riddick. Now, the Chronicles of Riddick game that was for the Xbox way back when I enjoyed. Butcher Bay or whatever it was called.
Who made that? Dark something. They made the Darkness games also. Which I really liked that first, the Darkness. Excellent game.
Yeah.
But anyway, that Gods and Kings, I remember seeing a lot of Twitter chatter after it came out on disc and video of people being like, man, people should watch this movie. Like, I think it's insane, maybe goofy in ways that are entertaining, at least. But yeah, nothing I want to spend money on right away to see. Also, he did, what was that other movie he did with Javier Bardem?
Oh, Javier Bardem.
What was it called? The Counselor?
Let me look. It wasn't the,
so I heard some negative things.
That was
about
the Cormac McCarthy book that was adapted.
It didn't get like
The Counselor from 2013
shining reviews. But then I've also heard defenders say like, hey, people really need to look at this film. This is way better than people give it credit for. So I want to check that out as well. But Ridley's still got something in him, I think. It's just he's got to find that right balance of budget too, you know, and not being hamstringed by that. Like, take a cut on the budget so you can do what you want to do if you are being limited by, you know, studio or producer limitations.
Yeah. So I guess now, like I said, there wasn't a ton of other news. It's after Halloween now, so there's not as much horror news right now. I mean, there's general stuff out there, but in terms of, I think now you need to move on to the stuff we've been watching. And you watched Happy Death Day, right?
Oh God, I did see that movie. I didn't. I'm glad you said that. I totally did not. I erased it from my memory.
Yeah.
Like it never happened. Like Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, just revert back.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, we went out. We hadn't been in theaters together with my wife since we had our kid. So it was our anniversary. So, you know, it was like, okay, what's the best option? You know, there was, this was like a week ago. So,
before Thor Ragnarok.
And there was, Mother is out still here.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if I went to go with something that she would probably like just enjoy.
Yeah.
Just flat out enjoy.
Yeah.
So based on what I'd heard from people on that, I want to see Blade Runner again, but I didn't know if she would love that, and I've already seen it. So I didn't want to drag her to it if I've already seen that film, and then she ended up being like, plus it's long, you know?
Yeah.
Based on the reviews and everything, I thought, okay, this is kind of a surefire, at least somewhat enjoyable film.
Yeah.
Based on my perception of it, easy to digest. It's Groundhog Day, you know,
with a killer.
With a killer, and basically she's got to figure out who her killer was. Pretty easy to understand concept.
So kind of like the Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But, you know, just something about the tone of the film was a little, I don't know. It was just, and I like happy films, you know, like you see a film that's something like Guardians of the Galaxy, or I assume the new Thor, like where it's kind of like, hey, it's okay, we're having a lot of fun with this.
Yeah.
Not everything's super sour or super dour or serious. This film, I don't know, it's light in a way that's almost off-putting, like a Disney TV movie.
Yeah.
I don't know how to really put it because it's been a while since I've seen it now, and I've totally blocked that movie out of my memory. But just something about the tone of it seemed a little off for me. And as we walked out, my wife was like, yeah, when the movie started, I think I mentioned this to you. She's like, when the movie started, I thought, oh God, I hope the whole movie isn't like this.
Yeah.
And she said, and then it just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
And some people seem to really enjoy this film, and the concept is cool. But the lead character, I think she is a fine actress, but her, I don't know. I didn't really gravitate towards many of the characters at all. It is almost like a you know, it is a whodunit, and you run through her day, and you kind of, I mean, you know right away, like they're showing you certain things because you're going to see them again.
Yeah.
And you got to put together the pieces. And some of that stuff is kind of fun, but again, you know, stories are all about the characters a lot of times.
Yeah.
And if you don't love the characters or even just the tone of it, it can be off-putting.
Yeah.
And there were some fine elements to it. It being PG-13 didn't really hurt it too much, I don't think. You know, there was some people getting killed in some brutal ways. It's not a ton, but enough to where it didn't feel like it was neutered too much by that.
Yeah.
And it still felt like a slasher, but it didn't have as much fun with the slasher elements as I expected. You know, with something like Scream or even Hot Fuzz, you know, like, because that is part slasher. It almost just felt it just felt like watered down to some degree, and it didn't kind of subvert the genre in any ways, I don't think. It basically just presented like, hey, here's a slasher. She's got to solve who killed her because the day's repeating itself for some reason.
Yeah.
And they kind of, I guess, talk about some thematic reasons why, but obviously there was just a concept and they try to build everything around it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just way more boring than it should have been based on that concept.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work all the way. Like throughout much of the film, it felt like I'm watching a concept. I'm not like invested into this story of what's happening. You know, like Groundhog's Day, I don't know, there's just something about that film that feels very natural, even though it's this weird thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of just devolves naturally. And this, it starts off right away. And And it's just like, okay, now we're going to jump into this, and here's the concept. Now let's run with it. And it doesn't really kind of dissect some of the elements I thought it was going to do based on that concept.
Yeah.
It just kind of runs with it until you find out who it is. And they do some change ups and some things that are interesting for sure. But not going to be on the top 10 list. And that's why I wanted to see it, because none of us had seen it. And I thought, well, at least I'll see it and let you guys know if I'm going to fight for this to be on a top 10 or something like that. But for me, I'm not fighting for this film.
Well, I mean, with a movie like that, I mean, it did well at the box office. I mean, for a lower budgeted movie that didn't have a ton of promotion, making, $50 domestic off of a low under $10 million budget is good. And
$50 million?
Yeah,
you said $50. I was clarifying.
$50 million, not $50. No, that was
This wasn't Amityville
Awakening debuted under $1,000.
$733.
But it only debuted in a handful of theaters. It was already for free on Google Play, and it was the Weinstein Company that had worked with it, and as that's all fallen apart due to his horrible behavior, then the movie was something that people wanted to shit on. But the like Happy Death Day, I still haven't seen it yet. I'll probably see it at some point, but to me, hopefully what they take away, studios take away from it is not to replicate that exact movie, but to say, hey, if you give horror a different twist and do something that either hasn't been seen before or is just, fresh and not just the standard by the numbers ghost story and or generic slasher, we can throw some money behind it and see what happens. And, throwing money behind it is still relatively low budget compared to other properties where, like Blade Runner 2049 had like over $150 million budget. And I don't know really what they were thinking. I mean, it's very rare ever that a property where you're getting a sequel for, a delayed sequel like 20 years later, 10 years later,
30,
whatever. Yeah. That almost never results in big box office unless the prior property was huge in and of itself. And Blade Runner was a cult hit that was really big on video and stuff like that, but it was, at the time it came out, it wasn't a huge movie. It wasn't a Star Wars or an Indiana Jones. It may have had as much influence on people, but it itself was not as popular. But, but with horror stuff, hopefully they will see with Happy Death Day and Get Out and some of these other things that have done well, is that you don't have to, by the numbers, just copy what was successful before. You can do something a little bit different, not spend a ton of money on it, and then just properly market it and then see results. So hopefully that's the lesson we taken away, not just trying to do another Groundhog's Day version of something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like, again, slashers not my favorite genre really anymore, but not that it ever was my favorite, but I was interested in seeing this because there was a mystery twist.
Well, it's something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people like mysteries. If you can sell somebody on it, something being a good mystery, like that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Have you seen that trailer for Murder on the Orient Express?
Yeah.
Don't know how that'll be, but like I really love that trailer.
Yeah.
And I think we're actually, my wife and I are going to go out, I think this weekend again, because she wants to see it. So instead of Thor or whatever, just so,
to even it out.
Yeah, to give her, because sometimes I can leave the house by myself and go see something.
Yeah.
And she's been really wanting to see that. And I think it looks interesting as well. Like it looks like Clue on a train, essentially.
The only thing that like is a downfall to me is it's got Johnny Depp in it. And at this point, I really don't want to see anything he's in.
Is he barely in it? Isn't he the guy that dies?
I mean, I think that's what...
I think he's the guy that dies. So I feel like, okay, he's going to be out of the picture.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of the movie he's in.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he weaseled his way into all these different franchises. Like he's in... I don't know if it's a spoiler or not. There's one big series he's in that he wasn't advertised as being in. And then he was supposed to be in the dark universe of Universal Monsters, but I think that's dead now. Or at least on pause. But in between the end of the year now, there's not a lot of big horror releases left between now and the end of the year. There's The Shape of Water, which really I don't think is a horror film. It's more just a genre film. The Guillermo del Toro movie that looked kind of like The Creature from the Black Lagoon, but in a different context. But then the new Insidious comes out in January of 2018. So you get your usual January horror film. At least this time it's one I'm more interested in than the ones we've had in recent years. When we had like Split that came out, which I enjoyed, and then Get Out in February, which I really enjoyed. But a lot of times you got stuff like The Forest, which was that Natalie Dormer movie about the Japanese suicide forest, where it's these kind of like high concept movies that to me just kind of fall apart. Once you get past that. So, seeing an Insidious film this year seems like it'll continue the tradition of there being a January horror genre film that's at least entertaining.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that because I really like that third one. I'm willing to give this one a chance based on that. And it's kind of great. Like right after Christmas, we are going to be back in the theaters seeing a pretty big, another entry in a modern big horror franchise.
Yeah. Just trying to think. So, two like things I watched. I watched as my own form of torture. I watched the remaining Saw films that I hadn't watched already because they're all on Netflix through Saw 3D or the final chapter or whatever it's called. The last one before Jigsaw that just came out in theaters. I did not see Jigsaw, but I've watched all the other ones. I didn't really necessarily devote my time to them. It was more of just I threw them on while I was doing other things. And so those movies, like part one, even though it had the kind of the biggest name actors in the series, it had some of the worst performances, which was probably just more of James Wan being like a first-time director of a big feature, low budget, probably not a lot of time for shooting, probably constrictions on that side. So I understand that to some extent. I think that 2, like in 3, were very inventive in a lot of the things they did. And then the kind of structure, like the twist structure that the series had in all the movies. So like parts 1 through 3... even if you don't like them, if you don't like torture porn, there's still stuff there to enjoy.
To appreciate.
And I even saw the other day on Twitter where Leigh Whannell, however you pronounce his name, was in the first movie as the character Adam, was writer on the first 3 films. He had said that they had planned to end it at part 3, or at least his intention was to end it at part 3. And then, of course, it went on for multiple entries after that. But part 3 was one where, spoiler alert, no spoiler alert, the movies are so old, it doesn't matter, and the DVD cover spoiled this anyway. The third one's the one where Jigsaw dies. So he is dead from part 4 on, and they have other people kind of doing the dirty work. So the third one, not that they're my favorite movies or ever go back, but like the second and third one I actually watched, I was like, oh, there was some inventive stuff in it, and it was well done, and of that type of genre, it was probably the better element, the best representation of it.
What's your favorite one out of those first 3? How would you rank them? The first
it's kind of hard because I really don't want to go back and rewatch any of them. I just hadn't watched them since they came out, and I only really watched through part 4 initially. The first one just was a big deal because it was like a small budget independent film and kind of brought back the grittier element because it was around the same time as like Hostel and these other things are coming back. But in terms of just like from what I remember liking the second one more. Okay. And then kind of like the first and the third one, and the rest of them, like part 4 takes place parallel to part 3, which is like supposed to be a big reveal, and then part 5 to me just felt like a waste. Like I had Julie Benz in it, who's been in a bunch of genre stuff. Like she was on Angel, and then was in the John Rambo movie, and a bunch of other. She was on Dexter, a bunch of genre stuff. And then they just kind of wasted her and wasted that plot line with like there's 5 strangers in a house and they have to either work together or against each other to survive. So the fifth one I thought was kind of a waste. The sixth one, I didn't really find much to enjoy in that one. And then the final chapter was just kind of like, oh, they brought back this, like, there was one character that came back. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then it's like, but I was left with no impression and it was all kind of forgettable. So, like, the first 3, I thought if they had wrapped it up with the first 3, they could have had something good. But then they went on for too long and introduced, like, another lackey that took over for Jigsaw that really wasn't a compelling character at all. And that when he finally, was out of the picture, you're like, oh. But then that was when the movies ended, and there's the new Jigsaw movie that I don't think picks up with those characters. I'm not sure. But
Son of Jigsaw.
Like those movies had like the interesting element of what would you do in the situation,
Yeah.
But at some point it went from being you're in a trap where you can theoretically live to just a set piece for a brutal death, and there was almost no way the person could live, or if they did, it didn't really matter because they were so destroyed as like an individual.
It's like analog Final Destination. Either way, you're going to end up dead.
Yeah, so I mean, like, the concept or whatever was good enough. And, like, the thing is, like, the first 3 films, even though there was, like, the torture element to it, there wasn't as much as you might have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, like, some effective set pieces, but there was also some storytelling going on. And there was, some, things going on plot-wise. And then it feels like there was some shifting is what they're doing. Because the way 3 ended, part 4 just seems like they I think they changed writing teams at that point, maybe. But I'm glad the torture porn trend that is kind of gone.
Maybe they can revive it with having a crossover film like the Human Centipede Jigsaw, where people have to work as like a competing human centipedes to get out of a room.
Yeah, you have like, do you want to play a game? Your ass is sewed to someone's mouth. Like, really, the human centipede, the person at the front of the centipede has it the best.
Yes. Yeah, by far.
And then I guess the person in the back has the best. Like, so the person in the front is eating real food. The person behind them is getting excrement and human waste. And the person behind them is probably getting like this is probably gross, so trigger warning if you don't like poop talk. The third person is probably getting a soupier mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not as difficult to consume as the
less nutrients on that back end.
So, but yeah, like the Human Centipede was one of those movies that just felt like the first one was at least like a movie. Then like the second and third ones are just so over the top. It's just like, come on. But I'm glad that trend has died down. The intending just to shock you with gross stuff. Because, in the Saw movies...
Well, with the internet, it's hard to do that on cinema now.
Or people just go watch real life videos of people getting killed, like Faces of Death.
It's thankfully we don't have to, that's not the gimmick that is hopefully not too bankable anymore. I'd rather see something well crafted than just shock factor. Because what's shocking, especially like in the 80s, is nowhere, it's much more tame now. In the 90s it was different, 2000s, and now it's just like, it really takes a lot. Hell, Human Centipede's like, how old is that? 15 years old now almost?
I don't think it's that old.
I feel like, was it the decade old?
I think it's within 10 years.
Is it? Okay, yeah.
But so the Saw films are all on Netflix. You want to watch them. The new one, Jigsaw, is still in theaters.
Anything else?
Watch those. I'm trying to think. I watched part of that show, Slasher Season 2.
Yeah.
So I did a video review of the first season
a lot of views
a while back.
It seems like people may have just watched that and then
people have gone back to it.
Yeah.
The first season wasn't super compelling, but if you're really wanting to watch that type of content, I thought it was better than MTV's Scream.
And who was involved in that?
It was like a co-production with Chiller and a Canadian channel, I believe.
Who was one of the directors on it? Was it...
I don't remember.
I thought there was somebody of note that was a director on that. So is that second season on Netflix as well?
Yes, that's where I watched it.
Yeah.
It looks like the director was Craig David Wallace, who...
Todd in the Book of Evil is what I was thinking of. That's why. That's a Canadian TV show as well. It's, not quite Tucker and Dale, but it is like a comedic high school take on demonic stuff.
So Slasher Season 1, I generally, I've seen some people in the comments who have a more negative opinion of it. Like, it wasn't anything I was advocating for. It's more of just if it was up your alley, if a slasher TV, if an episodic slasher TV series is something that sounded like you would be interested in, I thought it was somewhat effective.
Yeah.
This new season, it's set in a wintry snow locale, but I just can't get into any of the characters whatsoever, and I really don't care about anything that's happening, and I don't think I'm going to finish it because I've tried to watch. It's like, it starts at a summer camp, but then it mostly takes place in the present when they go back to the summer camp, like years later in the winter. So that's the setup.
The winter stuff can be cool, but a lot of times it's just fun seeing people in environments you want to be in yourself. It just makes it easier to watch sometimes.
If the cold plays a part in the story, something like John Carpenter's The Thing, like the isolation and all that plays into it. But this, it feels like more, if they're doing multiple seasons of it, they're just kind of going to different locales or different visual locations, just so it's not a rehash of the prior seasons.
Which I can appreciate that, though. You know what I mean? That they're at least, trying to do something to at least set it apart and maybe able to put in some environmental factors at play if they want to.
But like the second season, I don't care about any of the characters. It's just like, I don't really see what the point is for me to continue watching. Aside from just having it on the background doing laundry or some other things, it's not something that was really grabbing me. So
maybe you need to watch it. I'll do another review though.
do a review.
Spare people.
Yeah, so I might finish that. And then I also read Twin Peaks, The Final Dossier, which is a new book from Mark Frost that goes back through, fills in the gaps between Twin Peaks Season 2 of the show and Twin Peaks The Return, or Season 3, or whatever it's going to be officially referred to in the future. So it fills in the gaps between that, and then it discusses some of the stuff that happened in the current season. And that, not spoiling anything, it's just that's the book. It's out. It's not a very long read. It's like under 150 pages. I read it in one night. I mean, it took about 2.5 hours, but I found it to be a pretty quick read. And
We'll do a video on that.
We'll do a video
once I get
on that.
through it.
Yeah, so that was all I had a chance to watch. And then, like Halloween, aside from watching the 9 episodes of Stranger Things, that was really all I had a chance to consume media-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a little bit of the Halloween films because they were on TV.
I watched part of H2O, but
I watched the David S. Pumpkins Halloween special. That was totally fine. It's basically, kind of in the vein of a little bit like Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah.
And a little bit like Cat in the Hat, somewhat. Like he is somebody that is like conjured during Halloween.
Yeah.
And then he also is like a little mischievous almost. It's, not super strong, but I think it's a cool thing that they made that, just kind of like a throwback animated special.
Yeah.
I checked out like halfway through, was like looking at my phone and kind of distracted. And like it was like super, super strong, but it would be a cool thing if they air that once a year. I'm not saying it's going to be nearly as iconic as those films or like The Great Pumpkin or anything, but it's just a new thing to watch.
Well, something that started as kind of a one-note sketch that just happened to go viral because of Tom Hanks and just the kind of one-note anti-comedy nature of it.
Yeah.
And then it is interesting to see them because usually whenever they branch out and make bigger things out of sketches, they turn into movies that underwhelm, with the exception of like Wayne's World.
Yeah.
Because like the Coneheads and...
I mean, I like a lot of their films that most people don't like. I like the Coneheads, Night at the Roxbury I like.
But like a lot of those like underwhelmed overall.
Yeah.
And then at the box office...
It's Pat.
Yeah, it's Pat. What was some of the other ones? Ladies Man.
So like a half hour... It was a good format, and it's animated, so it's something else different, and it's almost like a take on those. Like, and there's some stupid stuff in there, like he has the pumpkin mobile, and it comes out of the ground, and it's the shadow of it, and then when it's revealed, it's a giant strawberry instead of a pumpkin. Like, there's really dumb stuff like that in there. So yeah, I enjoyed it for the most part. I sat through the whole thing, and then. What did I just now watch? I just now watched Road Games.
Yeah.
Which is from 1981, Australian film. I've got a soft spot for Australian films. I've been wanting to watch this for a while, and I tried to cancel Shudder and Showtime through Amazon app, and for some reason I messed something up. Didn't cancel it, so I still have Shudder for another month. So that is on Shudder to watch. The director is Richard Franklin. He did Patrick, which was from 1978. That is the film about the guy who's paralyzed, who is kind of doing stuff with his mind.
Yeah.
A little bit of a thriller, low budget because it takes place a lot in a single room or location. Part of that was the inspiration for Uma Thurman's scene in Kill Bill with her, like, wiggle your big toe and stuff like that. I remember Tarantino talking about loving Patrick. They did a remake of that also. They've also done a remake of Road Games. And then he also directed Psycho 2 and Cloak and Dagger, which I remember liking Psycho 2, but I like Australian films from the 70s and 80s, so I've kind of always tried to check out those when I have the chance. So based on the cover, for some reason, Stacy Keach is the big name, and then Jamie Lee Curtis. I always assume... this was like Spielberg's first film. What was it?
Oh, Duel?
Duel. I always assumed it was like Duel.
Duel.
An Australian duel with a truck driver and Jamie Lee Curtis as the victim. It is not that. Stacy Keach, I'll just say it right now, he's not the killer. He is kind of, it was described as this, and I think it's apt. It's almost like a Rear Window, where he believes somebody may be a killer. And he is suspecting them, and Jamie Lee Curtis becomes involved later on. He kind of basically she's a hitchhiker. It's
so kind of like The Fog.
Yeah. So it's not as well of a crafted thriller as something like Rear Window or even Duel. You know, it's not high energy the whole time.
Yeah.
It is kind of just, you know, it's a differently paced film because it's from 1981. You know,
Yeah.
things are a little bit different back then. This was a couple years after Halloween. And Halloween is even slow paced now. And I don't say it's super slow paced, but it's not afraid to kind of let you just live with these characters a little bit without having tension, you know, suspense. And that's totally fine because Stacy Keach is like, I really like seeing him on screen, and it's cool just to kind of live with him. It's very Australian too.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about a lot of these films from the 70s and 80s is that it's a different flavor than a lot of American films. You know, it's kind of in the outback, and then he has a dingo instead of a dog.
A dingo.
Yeah. There's a little bit of spoiler with that. I'm not gonna reveal it, but yeah, and there's also maybe some paranoia about like a small town in the outback that doesn't go as far as I wanted it to, but much more enjoyable and not as simple as I expected it to be. Because I always thought, oh, this is just kind of a road slasher, like Duel, with Stacy Keach is the killer in his semi truck, and Jamie Lee Curtis is the victim because they picked her up after Halloween and they wanted the victim, you know. And it's very much like, okay, her character's, you know, she has a character, he's a character. The writing is not as simple as, oh, we have a concept and we want to just throw some stuff on screen, and a lot of the violence and stuff is pretty tame as well. Like it's not worried about using that as to sell the film. So not one of my favorite Australian films, but it's definitely enjoyable. You know, I'll probably give it like a 7 out of 10 or so. And if you're digging into those films, it's definitely a good one to watch for sure. Like I'll enjoy it, you know, more than a lot of the bad American slashers of that era as well too, the post-Halloween stuff. So check that out. There's a lot of good Australian films to check out though. Razorback, we need to cover that one day. Yeah. That's one of my favorite monster movies. Wake in Fright is, you know, more closer to art house drama, but it is very, it is filled with some suspense and some
Donald
crazy
Pleasance.
stuff. Yeah, that's an insane movie, and I love that movie. So there's a lot of great Australian stuff out there.
Yeah, so we're ready now to move to our discussion of Stranger Things.
I am ready now to move into the discussion if you are.
Yeah, so Stranger Things Season 2, we'll cover, you know, all the plot elements from the first episode through the 9th episode. So if you haven't seen it, we're going to be discussing spoilers. Because, you know, we're not going to go chronologically by episode, because when you watch all this stuff at the same time, you watch it in a binge, a lot of the episode markers and delineations, a lot of that kind of is foggy in your mind unless you go back and read like beat by beat breakdowns of the episodes or episode summaries. Because something like we did video breakdowns of Twin Peaks: The Return, and that you would get one episode, you'd wait a week, you get another one, or, you know, sometimes longer if it was like around a holiday break or something like that. But with the Netflix series, when everything drops at once, we had discussed about doing a TV, you know, recaps of the episodes. It's like, well, nobody's going to really take the time to stop after watching one episode and go watch a video discussing theories about what will happen in the future episodes when the episodes are just there to watch right now. And I know they do have like the Beyond Stranger Things show that's on Netflix that has some of the characters from the show in it and stuff, or some of the actors who play characters in the show. I did not watch any of that because I would just rather watch the actual show. Now I may go back and watch that at some point just because depending on like who they have on. Because like on at least the first episode they had some of the kids, but season 2 of Stranger Things, so just, you know, start out, it takes place essentially a year after, or close to a year after the first film, or not the first film, the first season of the show, and all the kids are, you know, a little bit older and probably, you know,
approximately 1 year older.
Yeah, I was gonna say like in the real world, the amount of time it took between shooting season 1 and 2, like it gave a believable age difference, and you know, you see. Now, one thing I did kind of notice is that the kid that played Mike, Finn Wolfhard, or I think that's how you pronounce his name.
It was essentially sort of the lead in the first.
He was
season,
the lead in
right?
the first season, and he was absent during a lot of the second season, or in a kind of a diminished role. But I think that's because they were shooting it at the same time, or around the same time. Or I would think
they
would be
beefed
part
up. Is it Dusty or Dustin?
Yeah, Dustin got more screen time, and Will got more screen time. It seems like there may have been a little bit of shuffling for other projects that were going on. But overall, like, starting out, all the characters that you love from the first season are back, and everybody, is entertaining. And it's, like seeing
Except for the
Joyce.
ones that are dead.
Yeah. Well, there's not many dead. So Barb is still dead.
We have the cook from episode 1 with 11.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's
I'm
gone.
just kidding.
Dr.
Yeah.
Brenner.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Like I said, full spoilers. I mean, although like some characters do appear in flashback, or
Yeah.
like Brenner, it's kind of an open question as to whether or not he still exists.
Well, it's not now because the creators.
Oh, did they say?
One of the producers said, "Yeah, he's still alive." Or,
Oh.
I think basically like, "Yeah, we're setting it up." So
Well, they didn't show him die on camera.
they said essentially they didn't show him die on camera with that in mind. They said with that sort of villain, if we had him die, we would really want to show it and kind of give you that satisfaction, I guess, for the masochist out there, for the psychos out there.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes it does feel a little bit comic booky when somebody's in a situation that they should die during.
I thought that was a little dumb when they brought that up, and I was like, what?
What they'll probably do is they've done in the past is, like in this season, you saw what happened to 11 after the events of season 1. So I'd assume at some point if Brenner, is alive, that they'll have an episode that shows how he got out of the situation in season 1 and then where he's been in the meantime, which The Walking Dead notoriously does a lot of like fake out deaths.
Yeah.
And if you start, I think with The Walking Dead that they've even realized, once you've done enough fake out deaths, people don't believe you and or care when it really happens because you desensitize them to the death of a character to begin with. So like, well, now that it really happened, I don't really care.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that enough, granted on, a villain, it's a little bit different than like one of your hero characters. And
Well, yeah, the whole thing with kind of showing how 11 got there, like I really didn't care about that. I feel like it was just spinning its wheels. Like
Well,
I was willing to just accept like some shit happened and she ended up in the woods based on the end of the other one. You know what I mean?
Like at the end of the first season, you saw Hopper going out and leaving Eggos in the woods. So I think you really could have picked up and not shown the backstory.
I felt like some of that was spinning its wheels on there. And real quick too, just to give context, they've said that there's going to be 4 seasons total.
Yeah, I know they said that they had like a finite
Because
endpoint.
even at the end of this season, the big, I already forgot the name of the giant. Is the giant villain the?
Well, it's kind of just like the smoke monster,
Yeah,
not the one from
squid thing.
Lost,
This big squid
the
thing
mind
in the
flayer
air.
or whatever.
Yeah, basically, there's not much resolution with that.
Well, it
And
basically
it was kind of frustrating because it's been teased in the posters and all that stuff, and it's like, look, if you're gonna hang so much marketing on that, and it doesn't feel like there's like a final showdown with this thing, like that's like teasing Snoke as the big villain in The Force Awakens. You know what I mean? When it's like, okay, we barely got any of it, and there was no resolution with that.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the just overall thing that you experience with serialized storytelling, in that you get like a glimpse of a larger conflict without getting resolution on it in the specific element that you're in.
Yeah, and I felt like the Marvel films, like Thanos in that, was totally fine. Like when they would touch on him, that was fine for me. It didn't feel like it was shortchanged on the story, the larger story at hand in whatever movies.
Well,
this I felt like, okay, now I'm like, we're probably like at least 3 years out from getting resolution on that. You know what I mean? On the full
if
thing.
they continue their current pace, then we'll get a season each year, or get a season in 2018, then a season in 2019.
I thought they said it would be at least a year and a half for the next one.
Or yeah, I mean, I haven't paid attention to the news.
I think they said it would be like a year and a half. It sounded like the next one's going to be further off than these two were from each other.
Because I mean, and all they really have to do is just, so this one was set in 1984, just set it in 1986, and then.
Well, they said there's a significant time jump as well.
I've seen news about the time jump, but I don't know how significant it can be. I mean, the kids aren't going to look that much older in a year and a half,
unless they do the It thing and it's set in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a huge mistake on their end if they on Stranger Things, because so much of the draw of the show was the kids.
I almost assume that they said that because they want to give themselves enough time to kind of maybe scheduling and everything.
Well, I mean,
and maybe they're saying, hey, this is going to be 2-3 years out. We're going to set advance the kids a little bit more even than they are.
Well, until you get into a scenario like Game of Thrones, where in the world of Game of Thrones, time is kind of nebulous, but not that much time has passed, but some of the kids have gone from looking like they're 8 to looking like they're 20.
Yeah.
And so I guess they're just trying to build a little bit of padding into Stranger Things to not encounter that same plausibility issue. Now, in Game of Thrones, it all just kind of like nebulous time frame, so stuff could have taken years that was really that on screen seemed like it takes no time. But with Stranger Things, so you open the season out seeing essentially a group of punks that don't seem like authentic punks from the era. It seems like the amped up, everybody's 120% punk from the get-go, which, like I was watching this with Julie, and I was like, basically, if everybody in that group had powers, it was like the New Mutants or something with X-Men. But you have the girl that is, 8 that has powers of her own, which she, at first it makes it like her powers are kind of the same as 11's, but then it reveals that it's something different. So her powers are to make people see things in their minds.
So she's like a vampire. Has one of the powers of a vampire.
Or there's like an X-Men character from one of those movies that has that power. From the what's his name? I'm blanking on the name, but
Derek, where are you at?
Yeah, where Derek at when we need, but like
phone a friend.
But it almost does have like, and then episode 8 and stuff, like some of the stuff with 11 and 8 and like that group does feel kind of like X-Men New Mutant-ish type storytelling, where they like if they gave them all like spandex costumes and you got like a comic book going on, which I think is by design to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've said like the Duffer Brothers, who are the showrunners for the show and who wrote and directed some of the episodes, they had talked about how they wanted to take risk with the new season and lay bricks for future stories. So the big thing that you'll hear about this season is there's one episode that seems like most people I've talked to thought that it could have been cut and you would have lost nothing. And that episode ties into the group you see in the first episode, the kind of punks with like 8. And essentially 11 like goes on the road trip with them. And that whole detour, to me, like, so the rest of the season, if you cut that out, the rest of the season feels like, very much in line with the first season. And you introduce some new characters. So you have like Max and Billy. So Max is the young, like, redheaded girl that all the boys are into, or at least Lucas and Dustin are into and wowed by. And then her brother Billy is the mullet wearing, like, one earring, Camaro driving bad boy from the 80s who's got an abusive father that is the reason he is the way he is.
Rob Lowe / Keith Sutherland from Lost Boys.
Yeah, or as somebody said, it's like Zac Efron dresses Toby Keith or something. So you have like that. You have like those new characters, and you have Paul Reiser, which I did like what they did with his story arc.
Yeah, my favorite thing about this season, new thing, was Paul Reiser and Sean Astin.
So Sean
Astin,
Astin,
characters I liked a lot.
Yeah, so Sean Astin is Bob and Paul Reiser. So you watching this, I got a lot of Aliens vibes from this season, from Paul Reiser being there to the suits they were wearing, and when they're going with the flamethrowers. And then there's even a scene where they have like the motion detectors. You see all the beeps.
Yeah, on the scene.
And so that's like, this is literally Aliens. This is that scene from Aliens. And all that, it's not a negative. It's just like for somebody who's watched that movie somewhat recently, it's very clear where it's referencing, but it's just kind of repackaging something you like in a new form, which the first season did too, with tons of ET stuff, which the new season did ET stuff. And then there's an episode where Steve and Nancy go to a Halloween party, and I was trying to figure out what their Halloween costumes were. They were dressed up like Risky Business, the Tom Cruise movie. The leads from that movie with Tom Cruise, and I forgot the female co-lead, but that was what that was. But like the season had a lot of 80s references, like Dragon's Lair, Dig Dug, and different arcade games, Camaros, Ghostbusters. It had a lot of references to things from like music. There's a lot of songs they played.
Yeah, the Ghostbusters theme playing was, I don't know, I was a little conflicted about that. Like,
so
I love that song, but then I was like, I don't know if this just feels like, I don't know, just something about it felt a little off, I think. I shouldn't be liking this.
I was okay with it. I was okay with it because to me, it felt kind of like moments from something like Back to the Future, and they kind of reference things that were popular. Not that they really referenced too much stuff in Back to the Future. But
the outfits were fine. I don't know. It just felt a little.
well, I did like too.
It just felt a little kitschy. You know, like almost like a commercial. Like it felt fun in a different way that Stranger Things normally hasn't been before. At least for me, like it felt more on the nose than anything this series had been thus far. You know, and it was just like acclimating yourself to like, okay, this is kind of what this is. Like I was okay with it, but I didn't like love it as much as I think they probably wanted everybody to.
Well, and like I enjoyed the little touches because you saw Joyce making Will's costume and his looked a little bit shittier than everyone else's. So I enjoyed the little touches like that because that was something that happened when you were a kid. You would see like, you know, the people whose parents had more money, they have a little bit nicer thing. So there's like elements like that I appreciated too. But like the story structure, you know, you started out with Will having visions of this kind of big, huge monster that kind of reminded me of something you would see in the movie The Mist, like the Frank Darabont adaptation of the Stephen King story from a while back with Thomas Jane. I've not seen the series, which is on Netflix now, but it got canceled after one season, so I don't know that I want to spend the time to watch it, and I heard bad things. But like the character, like the big monster, smoke monster reminded me of that. So you kind of have Will kind of encountering more kind of visions of that, and Hopper investigating, and then there's a thing where the pumpkin patches, all the pumpkins are rotting and dying, and he looks into that, and you find out that, you know, Levin's been living with Hopper like out in a cabin in the woods where he's keeping her away from everyone else, and then you see there's like Paul Reiser as part of the group that's kind of taken over Dr. Brenner's work, and they're kind of not outright bad guys. They're trying to clean things up.
Yeah, thank God. I told my wife that. I was like, well, maybe they're just not the bad guys. Maybe that's the thing where maybe we just assume they are a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And I think at first, especially it being Paul Reiser and knowing his past with aliens, you know, you're like, okay. But I thought, well, maybe they're not going to do that. And I was very happy that they didn't.
Yeah, because you had him being the voice of, at one point they're going to do something that could possibly kill Will.
Yeah.
And then he was the one that was saying, like, no, we can't do that. We can't just kill this kid. And so some of the people in the company were either bad guys and or just straight up scientists.
I mean, to be fair, that's every single company. Well, there's just some bad guys in the corporate world.
Well, in the real world too, it's like, do you possibly kill one kid to save the entire city? So you have things like that. So you have like the progression of this kind of smoke monster, and then you have where they find the little creature, or Dustin finds a little creature, Dart, that eventually grows up to be a demidog or a demogorgon dog hybrid, or maybe still like a teenager demogorgon before it's full size. There's a number of them, but you have like elements like that. You have kind of the budding romance between, or the kind of I won't say love triangle because it's kids, but the relationship stuff between Lucas and Max, and Lucas and Dustin and Max.
Which Dustin really was never in on the equation. He just wanted to be.
Yeah, and then you have, you know, Mike's, you know, continued desire to see Eleven, or as we learn, her name is Jane. And then you have her kind of reconnecting. You have Eleven reconnecting with her mother and aunt and learning more about what happened to her mother, and her real name is Jane. So you have more elements that fill in the backstory in some of the characters. And then you kind of have this overall expansion of this kind of the upside down kind of infecting the real world. Now, one thing I will say is that in season 2, Hopper as a character had an arc that episode to episode was okay. And when you're in it, you're like, watching the episodes, I didn't have much of a problem with what he was doing or the actions his character took. But once I looked at the season in total, it's like he was just being a dumb asshole the entire season, because so he kept 11 cooped up by herself for over a year. He went and investigated an underground tunnel in the Upside Down by himself at nighttime where no one knew where he was.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about some of the dumb...
He let Bob go off by himself, so he's the one that knows how to fight. He lets Bob go off by himself with just a handgun he's never used before when there's all these dangerous creatures. He should have went with him. So there's just times where he kind of lets... It didn't seem like he tried enough to save Bob. So there's just elements where it seems like episode to episode, it didn't seem that unreasonable, but when you stack all of it up, it seems like he was acting a little bit out of step with where he arrived at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
And I think that's typical behavior of sequels, where a character who reached a certain point in the sequel kind of gets reset, and is doing things that aren't the smartest, because otherwise there's no plot if everyone does everything that's the smart thing to do immediately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm okay with him keeping 11. I guess he, thought that was the best option.
Yeah.
It's in a hard place for that, but it was cool that this season wasn't just find 11 or, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I kind of like that. Like, okay, we're just starting at this point. And that's when I was a little bummed, like seeing her backstory. I'm like, I kind of get it. Like they're showing a little bit more than I need to do. Need to know.
They're doing the same thing that a lot of TV shows do or sequels do, where it's like there's you already know the jumping off point. She is here. She is with Hopper and has been there for a while. You don't then need to show exactly from point A to B how she got there, because I think people could just put it together.
Yeah.
And
it makes you think the differences in Twin Peaks: A Return, how they don't put anything on a plate for you as far as explanation of how people get, like, you just get thrown into scenes of these characters you haven't seen in 20 years. And, somebody's painting gold shovels and you're like, what is going on?
And then there's a book that comes out later that explains more of the stuff. But like with Stranger Things,
real quick about the spinning the wheels too. I read one article that essentially somebody was talking about it. Feels like, this season was like, what was it, one episode longer or whatever?
Yeah, it was 9 versus 8.
So yeah, they have that essentially like that little pilot, episode for this other possible series that may or may not happen based on the fan reaction. But basically the point being made in the article I read was that like they may have extended this season because Netflix just wants to get your eyes watching Netflix as long as possible. You know what I mean? Like basically the more time you spend on their service, the better for them.
Yeah.
And I think recently they said, one of the CEOs said their competition is sleep.
Yeah.
So you would hate to see some of these series to get bloated. Well, just based on the fact that they want to have more content of their most popular shows.
Well, it sounds like on Stranger Things, they kept the episode count, even though it was increased by 1 over the prior season. It was still 9 episodes. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like the bloat that some of their other series have, like the Marvel series, where they're like 13 episodes, where they should really be 10 or 8.
There were no episodes. 8 was whatever. But as far as the main storyline, 7 was whatever. But as far as the main storyline, there were only moments I felt were like, I don't need to see this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even some of her backstory with her mother, that was kind of cool. But again, some of it was just explained backstory. Well, I like for there to be a little bit of mystery.
Well,
sometimes.
So the show in general, even though it did give you some of the backstory elements of how Eleven got from the end of season 1 to where she's at in season 2, it was not an entire episode. It was just sprinkled into an existing episode with like other storylines. So it didn't do what The Walking Dead does, or at least I haven't watched this season, but The Walking Dead would often split the main characters up, or, jump back and show you how a character got from point A to point B in like these one-off episodes. And then a lot of times to me, that was just spinning their wheels, and just because they had to make 16 episodes, as opposed to a series where there's no set episode requirement, and there's not mid-season breaks or any of that garbage. Like throwing in filler episodes, like episode 7, it feels like a building block for a different story they're going to tell a larger element of later. I just wish it'd only been half an episode or reduced considerably.
So I think maybe like part of an episode, less of an episode, because I know the beginning and end they do kind of.
Well, it did do the Walking Dead thing of you set up a climax.
Yeah.
And you leave people on a cliffhanger, and then you go to an unrelated story that's happening parallel or prior to that, and then you have to let this story finish before the character goes back into action in the other story.
I saw somebody tweet about it, I think before I had even seen that episode, and they were like, well, who the hell are these new characters? Will's in trouble. We got to get back to Will.
Yeah.
On the last podcast too, we touched on this season because you'd watched like 4 episodes. I'd watched the first one. My favorite element of this series is really like the beginning of it and then the very end, because I kind of like just seeing these kids, their day-to-day life. I like just it being the freaks and geeks, like Stranger Things, freaks and geeks. But I understand if it loses the sci-fi element, that's kind of loses what Stranger Things is. I think that's the most successful because it is the most that feels less of like nostalgia service you know what I mean? Like your mind isn't jumping to other things when you're just seeing these kids be kids.
Yeah.
When they aren't like, the Ghostbusters costumes are a little bit that, but at the same time, it's like, oh, this kid's celebrating Halloween. You know, it's a big film. That's fine. But even just, some of the alien references I enjoy on one hand, other hand, I'm like, I can take it or leave it. It doesn't turn me off, but I think they're very strong at writing these young kids, but the teenagers or the punks, I don't think whoever the writers were for that are not as talented as the people that are writing the young kids are.
Well, I made the same. I have to look at the episodes to see if it was the same people or not, but it just felt like the punks were just caricatures. It
felt like Dark Angel, the James Cameron series from the 90s. That's what it reminded me of a little bit. Like a little, I don't know, like comic booky, and just it lacked a touch of reality that I think some of the Stranger Things series has, and that's what makes it work.
Well, I think it was, such a departure from what we had been seeing previously, and then people realized, like the thing we enjoyed was seeing these characters, these kids interact, not these punks that we don't know anything about that are, so kitschy.
It's almost like a caricature, like, because punks are just a stand-in thing at this point.
Yeah.
They've been used so many times. So, it's, unless you're presenting it in a different context, if they just, again, they feel comic booky because they just feel like a caricature or a archetype.
It feels like it make more sense if you're trying to pull off various crimes and not get caught, that you would do it incognito and not have very noticeable characteristics that make you easy to point out.
Yeah.
But, so like those elements aside, like I think there's a lot of good character development that went on this season. Because the character Steve was one that I've seen a lot of, think pieces and articles written about. His continued development from kind of like arrogant jock jerk in the first season to more of like decent guy who's almost like the babysitter or surrogate dad in the situation.
I saw Adventures in Babysitting.
Yeah.
With an image of him. Like, I loved him in the last episode of the first season. Basically, he takes a turn and you're like, oh, awesome. Because I kind of like the actor. Something about him I liked. He had some sort of charisma, even though he was an asshole. Yeah. And I really liked that he came around and he was able to, like root for the character at a certain point.
I think they said like initially he was intended to be more of this, just the straight 80s, teen comedy bad guy. And then when they cast that specific actor, he brought something to it where they said, okay, like I still like you, and there's still something shining through the douchey veneer. Mm-hmm. So let's make this character make a little bit of a turn. So that in the season 1, there's like the point he reaches when he either after he has the fight with Jonathan, and he goes back and helps clean up the graffiti that his friends had done. At that point, he made the decision he didn't really care about what his friends thought, and he instead wanted to do the right thing. And that was the turning point, and this season just had him go further. Even regardless of what happened between him and Nancy, he became a decent overall character.
The stuff with what's the new guy's character's name?
Billy.
It was almost just so stupid because he was like, I heard you used to run this school. Like it was just so goofy. It was fine.
It was very on the nose.
Yeah, I didn't hate it because I thought again, I almost feel like that's what this show is now a little bit, and it was fine and it was funny. Like it was funny in the right way. I think because this series, it teeters on going almost into parody territory at times. I think it hasn't pushed past that limit yet, but it is so far that it's like it's riding that line at some points because it's so on the nose with some of these stereotypical elements that it's having fun with. Like it knowingly is having fun with. That's why it seems like a parody, but they are taking it seriously. It's a weird thing.
So something that would be a good question is, how is this perceived by us watching it, in our early 30s? A lot of the elements they're drawing from in a lot of the movies or TV series or different pop culture things they're referencing, like we watched and experienced and enjoyed in their original form. So, Spielberg movies, Aliens, John Carpenter stuff, John Hughes stuff.
Really is the stuff that I think that they're most successful with.
So there's a lot of different things they're pulling from. So if you're aware of all those original elements of pop culture and you enjoyed them, that does filter your enjoyment of the show through a certain lens because you're aware of all the references they're making and where they're coming from. But what does it feel like to somebody who is 18, 19 watching it that doesn't know all those reference points and isn't really aware of a lot of that stuff and never watched it.
Again, it's not a turnoff. It just makes it feel less special. And that's why, again, that I'm drawn to more of the character-based elements to this show versus the sci-fi horror action, just because it feels less special. It is a fun thing that takes these elements from the movies I like, and it's totally fine, and it's not off-putting at all, but it's not as, it's some of it just isn't that fresh. Like I like the baby mini Demogorgon or whatever, Demodog. Like I liked that kind of plot line with that. I liked that stuff a lot. I almost wish that would have been a bigger part to it, and the thing would have been wreaking havoc around town while there was like a B plot line with that. And then I'm like, I really liked that, and then Steve and Dustin's relationship, on the train tracks, and like that stuff was gold. Again, it was a character moment. You know what I mean? Like them two talking and him talking about how you get girls and stuff. Regardless if it's
good or bad advice.
But it's a teenager talking to a younger teenager.
I think
like
too, with some of the Demodog stuff, they could have gone in more of a Gremlins direction with it, because some of it kind of felt like that.
Yes.
But then I think it was veering into the larger narrative. So they really didn't go down the rabbit hole of that specifically, which they could still do at some point, depending on like what type of story they're trying to tell. But the overall story structure. So I feel like the first season, and two, part of it is in the first season, you don't really know what the Upside Down is or what the rules to it are or how it works. And you don't really know all the rules now, but you didn't, in the first season, you're kind of discovering what that universe is and what the rules are.
And that was the fun of it.
And then this season, you kind of have a baseline of the rules, and it kind of expands things out and does what sequels do. You start off with a certain amount of knowledge in the sequel that you didn't have in the first film, that it then expands on. And I think in that aspect, it did an effective job at expanding out the Upside Down and establishing threats that weren't just one creature, the Demogorgon, and it laid out more threats and how it can cross over into the real world. And the only negative things I would say about a lot of that is, you knew that Will was at stake and he was in danger, but I didn't seriously consider most of the main characters to be in danger throughout most of the season. It's like Dustin and Mike, a lot of those. I didn't feel like they were ever seriously in danger. The only time I felt that a character that was one of the, kind of main-ish characters was at risk is at the end when Steve was helping them get out of the Upside Down kind of catacombs. I thought like, oh, well, he's a goner now because the dogs are going to get him.
And he's had his redemption arc, and maybe they're done with his story.
Because in a lot of times, like on Game of Thrones or all these different shows, whenever somebody's kind of had their good moment, or their face turned, then they die, or like Walking Dead. But then Bob, so Sean Astin as Bob, was a great character, and I didn't really like going into the season. I knew he was in. I didn't really know what his role was, and then when he's kind of just the nice, loving, like down to earth, happy boyfriend of Joyce, who's like devoted to her and her kids. And this actually seems like the stabilizing presence she had never really had in her prior relationships. You see him at first, and he's kind of annoying, but then he grows to be very endearing, and you like him, and he does stuff to help.
Yeah, I was almost liking him so much, I thought, oh no, he is going to be, quote unquote, one of the bad guys, like a spy sent there. That's what I kind of was suspecting, because you liked him so much,
And then you have him get built up as a character, so he helps them figure out where Hopper is. And there's all these things, and he gets drawn into the main story. Because you realize in season 2, nobody outside of really the principal characters knows what actually happened. Because others, Mike's parents still think it's something to do with Russians. And there's the character Brett Gelman plays, who's kind of like the conspiracy theorist, who's working to find out what happened to Barb for her parents. And I thought he was a goner at some point, but then
he got the hell out of town pretty early, though.
Yeah, but like I was thinking once they sent those tapes out that they would have been collected and then he would be like executed. But it was a little bit of a laissez-faire attitude from everybody after that information got out. But they
had changed it.
But they had changed it to make it like a gas leak instead of upside down and interdimensional beings and things like that. So that that aspect too. And once again, like with his character, he was a little bit sleazy. Because I wasn't sure. It's like, is it cool that he's encouraging like teenagers to hook up in a spare room? But teenagers do anyway. It's just, but I think that was like part of his character arc, is just being kind of this out there, not normal by the books guy.
Yeah, he was definitely off again. Like, living alone, like a hermit. Even when he left, he's like, I don't ever come see me again. Like, he seemed a little off his rocker on some level.
Yeah, so you had like his character in the mix. So like you had some of those new characters. And so Max, who is the young girl who was the, object of, she was the one who Lucas and Dustin both were interested in. Like her character didn't get a ton of development. She just had an older brother who was slightly abusive and maybe racist, or most like, because I assume that's what his motivation was.
Yeah, I know. She was very protective over, was Lucas? Is that his name, right?
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I almost thought I missed it at first. I'm like, is that what they're getting at? That she can't be seen specifically with him, What you were talking about, none of the characters being in danger. Early on in the episode, he sees them riding their bikes and he's about to hit them.
Yeah.
And I thought, what if they just killed off all these kids right here? And I was like, how great would that be for the turn of the series?
If they killed off one or all.
Yeah, if they just knocked them all out, like they couldn't do it. This is not that type of show. It does not have that type of fan base, but like it's something, again, like, you have these dramatic turns in shows. It's like, all right, we are really going to do something ballsy with season 2 here.
Yeah.
This is going to go in a totally different direction. I just thought, like, not that that's necessarily what I wanted, but I would have been interested to see what that series would have been without these kids.
But damn if they had done that. But
yeah.
That feels like something that, I don't know. I mean, David Lynch would do that.
That's what it made me think of. Like, Twin Peaks, like it's something totally you just think, like, what are you doing? Like,
or something even like Metal Gear Solid, that series.
Yeah.
You only get to play Solid Snake in 2 games, and then the rest of them are somebody else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like that moment could have been dark as hell, but they didn't really go in that direction. But, and I was just surprised too that by the end of season 1, the Billy character didn't get taken out by a demidog or some other dimensional being, but it did lay out that the reason he was such a jerk was that his dad was abusive and probably had been throughout his entire life that molded him in the person that he was. And then you get to contrast him against other characters, but I feel like Max like didn't add a lot to the season, and there was that kind of cringeworthy moment when Eleven got to the school looking for Mike and she saw Mike with Max. Then had like that jealousy moment. Like that's something that that plot point you see happen in a lot of things in both directions, male and female, where it's like, oh,
well, it was just like it was a little dumb there, like just basically like like kind of pulled it out of thin air, because it's like why would all of a sudden she be jealous? You know what I mean? Like you think she wouldn't.
Well, I think it'd just be that she had wanted to see him for so long, and she finally does.
Yeah,
and
it's like
this.
I don't know. You wondered if her mind would think that way, being raised in the situation.
Well, as being as naive about social situations.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But then it's almost like comedic at the end when she's like using her powers, or she's supposed to be thinking of stuff that makes her angry.
Yeah.
And that popped in her mind. Like, I get that, that's an emotional thing, but it almost seemed like goofy, like, and trivial that, the girl skating around
yeah
would be like the thing that would help her destroy this creature.
Yeah, I mean, so there's elements like that. I mean, I think too, like Max was supposed to be a strong character, and she was independent and stuff like that, but it was more of a device for the other characters.
I have to say though, her performance, she fit right into that crew. I think she did. I think her performance, she was just as charming. Well, and sometimes you're kind of, it could have went badly, especially being child actors. I don't know the range of it, but in my mind, I feel like there's probably less child actors that are that great and charming to pull from than there are adult actors. You know what I mean? Like you feel like that pool is a little bit smaller.
Well, it's a skill set that takes a little bit of experience to get, or just kind of a naturalistic ability.
Yeah.
But the one thing that made me think of was It, where there's a female friend who's the redhead. So it was just kind of like a similar plot beat. And once again, a single kind of female interest introduced into the group. And that's kind of a lot of the stories we get from that 80s Amblin era was all boys with one girl. And that's not necessarily emblematic of like some deep issue or, problem. It's just that's the type of storytelling that we're used to. And two, it's oftentimes written by guys where that probably was their experience.
Yeah, I mean,
growing up.
I had that a lot. Like I had, oddly enough, when I was of the era of these kids, or maybe like a little bit younger, maybe like 5th grade, when we would basically ride our bikes, go in the woods, spend all summer together, going to ponds and tree houses in the woods and all this stuff, riding our bikes. It was me and probably like 7 or 8 other kids.
Yeah.
And we had one girl that was my age that hung out with us that was kind of a tomboy. Her younger sister sometimes did, but she didn't all the time. But we had one girl. And, just it seems like sometimes that would even in high school, outside of school, when I was younger in high school, like 9th and 10th grade, the people I hung out with on a daily basis outside of school, it was like me and like 4 or 5 friends and one girl. Yeah. So it's like maybe the writers also just kind of experienced that, and that's kind of just what they lived as well. And those girls in that role, there's nothing that stood out as far as if I was writing those characters or writing some plot development. Yeah, I may plunk them in because they are just a cog in all of my other friends' relationships. You know what I mean? Like they're just another character there, and things just happen with them as well. Because even though not a lot happens with her, I feel like hardly anything happened with like Lucas last season. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, then like so I think
they try to give him something to do this season.
A lot of the thing that I enjoyed seeing was kind of getting a little bit more of all these kids' personal lives. Yeah. So you get to see more of Dustin's home life. Yeah. And you get to see more of Lucas's home life and his hilarious sister. Yeah. And
I mean, even though she didn't have a lot to do, granted that, some of the kids really didn't have much to do either last season as well. It's just the nature of, I think, them building these characters and figuring them out.
And two, just by the nature of storytelling, if all the characters come together and work together from episode 1, then you would end your story much sooner. Mm-hmm. So they did introduce new characters that, like, some of the new characters worked really well. Like Bob, unfortunately he will not be in future seasons most likely, as he met his untimely demise. And that was like the other issue I had with that is, okay, he knows basic and how to reset the computer system. Why didn't Hopper go with him? I know he said it was to help everybody get out quickly, but it doesn't make any...
Maybe he was just protecting them instead,
But what are the chances this guy who has no combat experience is going to succeed if anything goes slightly wrong? Yeah. It seems like if your only bet to get out of the building is for him to succeed, you would want to make sure that happened first. Yeah. And then worry about getting out second, because you got to get the doors open first.
And they just need to... They need to set up more drama. You know what I mean? That's all it was. It was just setting up more drama of you thinking he was going to get killed, him being safe, and then him being killed.
Yeah, it was essentially doing what movies and TV shows have done throughout the history of their existence and books and everything. But, it was just one of those things where, like I said, by each episode, in the moment, it doesn't really seem out of place. It's when you stop and think about things in the abstract and in the whole, like, well, a lot of things were kind of just for, more plot points than character development. But then, you still did have good character development, but you had some stuff that became apparent. It seems like they're trying to push Joyce and Hopper together, or kind of pull on their like shared past experiences and things like that.
Yeah. And I liked Hopper a lot last season, but, Bob, I like way more. You know what I mean? I was like, no, screw Hopper being with her. I want Bob.
Because like Hopper's someone else is like, has emotional problems that has to get over and has to overcome all this stuff. Whereas Bob was just in a state where he was good. But two, like in the episode where Jonathan and Nancy went to see the journalist, he talked about, oh, well, you two have like the shared trauma and all this stuff. And then they never really explicitly state that about Joyce and Hopper, but they have the shared trauma from season 1 and all that stuff. So they have these kind of like plot lines they're laying out and things like that. So
another thing about later on in the series too was, you just made me think about Bob and figuring things out was, she has the map around her house. Like, I wonder what dumb shit she's going to have plastered on her walls in season 3 and 4. Like, because like,
she has to have stuff all in the house.
I would rather them not do that again. I get it. It's a cool visual thing and you can kind of hinge. There's been a lot of like, animations and stuff or promotions for Stranger Things with the lights on the walls, but I would rather there not be shit all across her house again, because that's just going to feel too... Because
I actually didn't think about that.
I did. I was like, oh my God, they're doing this again?
They're doing, or at least in this iteration, it wasn't that people saw her as crazy anymore. Yeah. Because it was Will who had done it. Yeah. And it wasn't just reiterating that exact same plot point from season 1.
But it's like, don't put stuff all over her walls again, please. I get it. It's a very cool thing, like a visual thing that's, you can draw out some of the story and what's happening through visuals. And I think they should do that, and I commend them. But don't do it in that way again.
Well, and two, like I went to that Stranger Things pop-up bar in Chicago, and they had like the wall with all the lights and stuff. That's an iconic thing. I don't think anybody is going to be really replicating the drawings of the shadow or the tunnels underground map.
What if he like reverts to a primordial state and is just wiping poop on the walls, and then that's the new thing is pop-up bars with poop sprayed all over the
So yeah, hopefully that won't happen. But yeah, I mean, like the thing that season 2 did well is like it was called Stranger Things 2, so it's kind of just like a sequel. So it took all these characters that you loved already, brought them back, gave them something to do, sidelined some more than others, gave some of them the spotlight a little bit more than they had in prior seasons. Because like Lucas got way more to do than he did in season 1 because they kind of separated him from the group for a while in season 1, and Dustin didn't have a ton to do because it was mostly Mike. So they gave you a little bit more focus on some of the characters, introduced new characters, some that will continue to be around, some that are gone, but who did raise the stakes and at least give them a body count of characters you cared about. And they set stakes for future seasons to have things happen that revolve around the Upside Down and other, and at least one other kid with powers. And just kind of set the stage for that. And 11, there's something I will say too. The main thing I took issue with Hopper keeping her isolated for a year in the cabin was he didn't attempt to homeschool her, so she really had no more ability to read or write than she did at the end of last season. I get why they did it from a story point, because people liked her kind of fish out of water element to her character and the way she interacted with others.
They could have just had a couple hooked on phonics packets to let you know that she was doing some sort of development.
But if they had let her get more homeschooled and more acclimated to socialization, because in this new season she still didn't know what certain words were and what things meant. If they had done all that, then she's more of an adjusted character, and a lot of those character elements people loved about season 1 would be different.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it was just kind of stalled character development for plot purposes, more so than things that were making sense. You would think that if she's stowed away in this cabin while Hopper's at work every day, giving her books to read and things that would at least help her learn would be positive and something to spend time doing. But that's more of just minor things when you think about it in the context of a real world. When you consider it's a show about, interdimensional beings and monsters, and it's the real world stuff isn't something you can squibble with as much. But at the same time, the real world elements and the relationships are what draw you into the show more so than the sci-fi trappings and all the 80s references. Like, if you didn't care about the characters, then none of it works. So I don't know that season 2 had as many uber iconic moments as season 1, like the van getting flipped over and some of those other things. In and of themselves, those moments were just references to other things like E.T. But this second season, to me, didn't have as many iconic visuals as the first season.
Yeah, it felt for sure. Like a lot of stuff happened with the demi-dogs and all that stuff. But yeah, it just didn't feel there wasn't as much of a build-up. It felt like we just got served a series of things like that.
Yeah.
But because there was no real build-up, it wasn't as memorable, you know? But this season also felt more reactive than I probably would have wanted to. I really wish they would have just went on their own path, but the Barb stuff, they're like, we're going to give Barb some justice. Yeah. And it kind of hangs on that a little bit too long, and I get they pull that into the main plot. Yeah. But again, just hearing about all that and now seeing it in the season, it just feels like it feels like the season was almost too chained to that first season for me, with all the Barb stuff, with the backstory on 11. Like, I wanted things to be pushed forward more than just being explained some things or justifying some things. Like it, that didn't interest me. The first season's over with. I watched it one time like a year and a half ago. Yeah, I'm ready for something totally new, and it felt like I was getting rehashed a bunch of elements from that.
Well, and two, I think part of it is just it's the way TV works for the most part, unfortunately, in that you have a lot of retreading of ground and filling in backstory and having one-off episodes that don't tie into the main narrative. It's just kind of something you get used to when you watch a lot of TV.
Which I was honestly, like, as you know, I have low tolerance for TV too. You know what I mean? So that sort of thing, like, kind of pushes me away more.
Because, like, even stuff that we've covered for the show over time that we've enjoyed, even like Ash vs. Evil Dead did that to some extent, where you kind of have like this one non sequitur episode that is just kind of moving things around, because Game of Thrones does it a lot too, just kind of shuffling things around on the board, waiting for the big events to occur. And a lot of times, like I said, The Walking Dead is a huge perpetrator of set up this big action set piece where you're leaving on a cliffhanger as to what happens, go to an unrelated plot that takes an episode or more. I mean, at least in this one, it was only one episode. And then you come back to the main story and show what happened later. And hopefully they keep the episode order light. And they, at most spend like one episode per season kind of, exploring these new things they want to do. Because I think they could have really sidetracked and ruined the second season by going way too far down the punk rabbit hole in Chicago with all the power stuff. But by spending one episode there, it was one episode that felt a little bit wasted, but it didn't ruin the season by any means. It was just a little bit of a misstep, or at least something that needs to be seen in the context of a larger story that will be told later to be fully appreciated. As it stood on its own, it wasn't that satisfying.
Yeah.
And two, it kind of reminded me of moments from X-Men First Class when 8 was showing 11 how to use her power. And it kind of reminded me when Charles Xavier was showing Magneto how to use his power.
Yeah, it's just all feels, again,
familiar,
a derivative of things we've seen a lot.
Familiar, but
not. But it's one thing when it's derivative and you're not drawn into these characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it feels very throwaway. But I've saw like one of the writers or somebody defend that, saying, "Well, we need this development for 11 to pay off for the end," and I totally get that. But aside from what she found out about her mom, kind of this and the ending, she really wasn't super interesting in this season either. She has her Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man 3 moment. But other than that, she's nowhere near as intriguing as she was in the first season. And I get the mystery has been revealed.
Well,
but
I think too, part of it is just the same thing that movies, TV, and video games run into. If you have a slightly overpowered character, if you let them just rip and go straight on from episode 1, the story's over. So, like the Metroid games, you would start out with all this equipment and you lose it and you have to get it back. So with 11, she could have, if she was involved in the main story arc with the Shadow Monster and the Demi-Dogs and all that from the beginning, it would have been a lot easier to conclude those more quickly. And so I see the, kind of splitting her off from the main story and let her coming back around and circle into at the end. It's just systematic, something that's symptomatic of serialized TV. But the main thing too is, even if it sounds like we're being critical, I still really enjoyed the season. If bringing the end, aside from, so all the way up to episode 7, because I was watching it with Julie, each episode ended and we look at each other, it's like, okay, how late is it? Do we want to do another one? And the answer is always yes, until we were just so tired we literally were falling asleep. So we watched the first 4 episodes, then watched the next night, watched 2 more, and then you end off episode 6 and it's like, oh man, what's going to happen? And then you go to episode 7, you're like, okay, this is wasting time, but I want this to end now. And now we're back to the story. So even though there was that little bit of a lull, it just made me want to watch it to the next episode. So it was a quick watch, and I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I think it is a very, it doesn't knock my socks off. I wouldn't say I'm a gigantic fan of this show, really. I like the first season more, and not really because this season was that much subpar quality wise.
Yeah.
It's just I've seen it already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some of this stuff I'm seeing again is less interesting. Again, the character stuff is what I love so much. And we did watch it chunks at a time like that as well. Part of it, honestly though, one was not wanting to be spoiled on it, because I was let's just get through this.
Yeah.
If I'm spoiled on it and not in love with it anyway, you know what I mean? Then it's going to feel ugh.
Yeah.
And 2, just because I knew we were doing the podcast, I wanted to make sure I got all the way through it and didn't, wasn't trying to catch up last minute. But having said that, it is a very enjoyable watch. It's an easy watch. I don't know. It's almost like comfort food,
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of satisfying moments and some good character moments, but at the same time, some goofier. We were laughing at the show more this season. And it really wasn't while we were watching it too much. It was like in the middle of episodes being like, man, that's just some dumb stuff, but it's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's.
I mean, I think that the intention though in that was to kind of make like some of the over the top stuff to be like Billy, his character, like his feathered hair and his earring.
Again, it's almost like teetering on that parody line. And I think it's fine, but it makes it more throwaway, I think, than maybe they might want it to be. I feel like they want this to be something people take seriously on a certain level, but have fun with. But it almost feels like, I don't know, it's just, they're almost pushing the line for me to where it's going to feel even more disposable. If it all just feels like a little wink and a nod at a bunch of things.
Well, I think that at least in this season, I mean, there's some elements like the music. The music, if they reference contemporary music, it's always going to, for those who are aware of that music and listen to it previously and know it, it's going to stick out some because that happens in like in anything when you have like real music show up, especially stuff from like a specific era and point in time. Like everything in Vietnam has CCR in it, so things like that occur. So stuff like that I think will continue to occur. But I think in this season, a lot of the winking and nodding they did as references to things were kind of like the Ghostbusters thing. Luckily, they didn't spend the entire season in Ghostbusters costumes. That was just within the context of Halloween.
Yeah,
night.
and that didn't bother me. Like I said, that didn't bother me too bad. It's some of the character stuff that feels like it's well-worn territory.
Like the stuff with Billy. And,
and again, it's funny, but it's almost so stupid. You know, like he's got a mullet in a Camaro, and he's an asshole. Like, I don't know. Again, I enjoyed his character. Like, I enjoyed that part.
Well,
but it just makes me put less stock in the show. Like it makes me feel like the show is less significant.
Well, to me, it's not going to have the thematic heft and weight of something like Breaking Bad.
Yes,
it's a little bit lighter fare. So it feels
that's fine. Yeah,
it's like I'm trying to think of like movie examples. So it feels more like a Guardians of the Galaxy compared to Blade Runner 2049, because Blade Runner's got more serious themes and elements and things like that, and is played straight, as opposed to Guardians of the Galaxy, pokes fun and laughs and references.
I want to find a better. Did you see Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like the end of that, the thematic weight of the end of that, was very strong, stronger than anything in Stranger Things almost. But like I know what you're getting at though. Like it's very much like, hey, we're just gonna have some fun, and that's totally fine.
And pop culture references and stereotypical characters that kind of turn around and be a little bit different.
The character stuff at times is so good. I just want this show to be a little bit more. I feel like I'm really gonna run out of steam if I get 4 seasons of this, and the sci-fi elements are basically playing with the same things as they have been these two. That's just it was. The first time through, it got criticism. People said, "Oh, we've seen this stuff before in all these movies. It's just taking these elements." And the other arguments were like, "Well, that's fine. That stuff is fun. Some people haven't seen that stuff. I was okay with it. Yeah, it wasn't appealing as far as feeling like it was something totally fresh, and it wasn't blowing my mind, but I was fine with it.
Yeah.
This time around, it's you know what I mean. It's a little bit less, less special than it was the first time.
You can use those elements, those familiar elements, to draw you in, and you can do like nods and references to things. But if you make the entirety of your story essentially, this is just Aliens, but with something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Then
Aliens Indiana.
That will wear thin over time. But if you just kind of use like these familiar tropes as like an entry point to a story, but then make it its own developed thing, which hopefully they'll do with the remainder of the show, because it looks like they're setting a lot of stuff up that would be more original storytelling that they would then use to resolve the overall conflicts of the show, versus kind of the more kitschy, wink and nodding type stuff is more surface level, just kind of done to keep it fun. Because this isn't like a show where they could go dark. Most things do go dark at some point. But even the darkest element, like if a character dies, it's still not as dark as something like The Walking Dead or a lot of shows where it's kind of dour and downbeat.
And that's not this show. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be dark to be good.
That's part of why I think it kind of has like the big popularity that it does. Is they had end caps and special merch at Target specifically for it. And I think like the Nielsen, like there is no real ratings on Netflix because Netflix doesn't give out their data. But Nielsen was saying that like the debut weekend, 15 million people watched Stranger Things, and something like 9 million had watched it from beginning to end in the first weekend. So numbers that are really hard to compare to something like The Walking Dead or other shows, because one, those numbers aren't real. They're just estimates. And if 9 million people or 10 million people watch the entire show in one weekend, that's not really something that's ever happened with network TV to even compare it to. So if like 9 million people watch every single episode, that means you would average, 9 million per episode. And that's in just one weekend. Over the course of its run, it'll probably, vastly more than that. It's all numbers that are kind of hard to make sense of. I'm sure they're going to continue but like my main thing is hopefully that gives Netflix the, confidence in creators that have a story that's not just adapting an existing property to go out and make something new. It can reference stuff and be, referential to things, but as long as it's a new story and new characters and not just adapting Marvel for TV or,
Maybe we'll get a shared Netflix universe, and by season 4, they'll be in the 90s, and we'll have a Full House crossover.
Well, I mean, the show could cross over with the X-Files or plenty of other sci-fi properties. They don't have the rights to those, but...
Again, not like I was super high on it by the end of it. I enjoyed it. It was an enjoyable watch. I had a good time watching it for sure.
Well, and
I'm looking forward to the 3rd season. I'm just, I'm just a little bit more hopeful that things maybe don't go as like I could have predicted this season almost on a certain level. Not everything, but you could have just said.
Well, after they
if you're
laid
making
out
a joke list, like what are they going to have to be really 80s? Well, they could do an arcade.
Yeah.
They could do a new Bully. You know what I mean? Like there's just some things that aren't super surprising about it.
I think too that. Like if you had showed somebody the first 3 episodes, it wouldn't be too hard to guess what the last episode is. I will say that like the resolution to the closing the gate or the portal to the Upside Down, that whole element of the plot to me was like it was well done and wrap that story up for now. But I was much more entertained by what happened at the school dance after the character work.
Again, the best moments I think, when the show opened, the first episode before shit hits the fan, and the epilogue on this one.
Yeah,
I think the dance stuff was so good.
Yeah, because you had like good character moments with Eleven and Mike, and then you had good moments with Nancy and Dustin and Lucas and Max. You had all these different plot developments that were the elements. If you just stripped out all the sci-fi stuff and made a show about those characters, it's still entertaining.
Yeah,
and hopefully they have more of that type of base layer of the show.
And it's hard to do that when things are in motion.
Yeah.
And you can't just have 2 episodes of nothing happening.
You can't just
I would
have
enjoy that.
Day in the life episodes.
Yeah, and again, I would love that. That's not what all the fans are here
if the
for.
show was 20 episodes, then you could do those.
Yeah.
If it's 8, if it's less than 10 episodes, you're not going to get a lot of that without the plot moving forward some. But
Twin Peaks figured it out, and they had Dougie Jones spend 10 episodes shuffling around drinking coffee.
At times on Twin Peaks: The Return, David Lynch seemed to be actively testing the audience's patience. Stranger Things is not doing that.
No.
So I guess we talked enough about I think some of the different elements. I guess we can kind of wrap up our thoughts on season 2. And I don't know if it's too reductive to give an overall score to the season. Just trying to think of how I would do that. So like a numerical rating is kind of like. So season 1, at least my first watch through, was more of like a 9. Like I was super enticed in it, and then this one was more like an 8, which I think often occurs with like a sequel to something. Now the fact that there's planned to be like 2 more seasons, once you've watched all 4 seasons, then I think you can reevaluate each season in context of the overall story, kind of like how sequels you evaluate in the terms of the overall narrative. Because if you have a really a second part can be emboldened and strengthened and seem better when a third part brings some of the stuff full circle and pays off on things you set up. So that can happen. Or to me at least personally, with like the Matrix movies or the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, well, the Matrix is a better example. The first Matrix, I loved it. The second one, when I watched it, I was like, well, it's a little bit long and a lot of this stuff's not really great, but maybe if they, tie it all together, the third one, it'll, seem better in retrospect. Then the third one came out and I was disappointed, and I was like, well, the second one was just too long then. And like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the first one I thought was an enjoyable romp. It was like, oh, it's just kind of like a fun summer movie. Then the second one's like, this is way too long, but maybe if it sets up enough stuff, then the third one I hated. So it's like, well, the second one, no, now I even think of it worse. So I think that the second season wasn't like that. I mean, I think it was still strong and still enjoyable, like to me, like it's an 8. But I think kind of what the future season hold will kind of determine how it's overall viewed in terms of the overall story arc. But I enjoyed it, and I'm sure a lot of people did because I've seen a lot of memes come out of it and a lot of jokes. There are a lot of fun elements from it. There's a lot of things to talk about. It didn't leave me with any striking imagery or kind of jaw-dropping moments.
Yeah.
But it was overall enjoyable and made me excited to see more of those characters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing with me too. I feel like the highs on this show, there weren't a lot of super high highs.
Yeah.
It was just a baseline, easy watch, again, comfort food and enjoyable show. And I felt like I was maybe going to be down on the show more than you were. You know, after I watched, I was like, I feel like I'm going to bash the show too much on the podcast. Maybe because I had time away from it a little, but I honestly probably would land around an 8 as well.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a totally fine show. I enjoyed my time watching it, but it feels very throwaway for me too. Like, it's nothing I'm going to probably watch again. Like, I didn't watch the first season again. And even though I like that one probably more than this one, I just not compelled to, even when the third one comes out, I'm fine just seeing a recap, watching that, being done with it, and then moving on.
Well, and two, like I watched, so Julie and I, we watched the first 4 episodes on the Saturday night, the 28th. So the night that a lot of people are doing their Halloween parties. And to me, like watching the episodes that took place during Halloween and like pumpkins and costumes and trick-or-treating, all that stuff, all that to me, I was like, okay, I'm happy that we watched this instead of pulling out like an older horror film because it's something new, and it gave that feeling of Halloween. So I was happy enough with that element of it alone, and then just overall, like I said, it's like you said, it's more like comfort food. It's and it's kind of like a lot of those kind of Marvel movies, like the sequel. So you had the first movie you liked, and then the sequel takes some of the elements further. Takes some chances that may or may not work, but then it just sets it up. So I did like the second season did not make me less excited to see the story continue. It made me more excited to see more of the characters interacting and hopefully getting more character development than just sci-fi.
Yeah, it made me hopeful. Like, okay, guys, you got something good here. Just I hope they are able to. Yeah, I hate to bash it too much, but be a little bit more successful with the third season, and that's only because I do enjoy the core of what Stranger Things is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just, there's maybe some missteps and some things that were a little over the top goofy that's, I don't know, but we'll see what direction they take it. They could go off the rails.
Yeah.
Or they could bring it back down, or they can kind of stay the course, which I think is almost the more boring thing. Either like go further with it and go a little crazy, or go in a different direction.
I mean, I could see him kind of staying the course with the third season, and then kind of going out and being more experimental with the final season. But as it is, I enjoyed it. I mean, like it's a little bit easier to watch than some of like the prestige shows that are kind of like your top 10 of all time type shows. But it also is entertaining and easy to watch. So I enjoyed it, and it's on Netflix. And I think the first one you can buy on DVD or Blu-ray now at Target. And I would assume they'll sell the second season at some point in case, you want to cancel your Netflix subscription at some point but want the show. But I think the show is more of like a pop culture phenomenon at this point. Kind of like Game of Thrones has become. Game of Thrones over the seasons, I think, has become a worse show as they kind of wrap things up and go off the books and have to do more original story. The burden falls more on the writers to finish the story than the source material. But it's such a pop culture phenomenon that everyone talks about. I think Stranger Things, regardless of what the quality is, it's still like a huge element. And it would take, I think, 2 bad seasons to kind of turn everyone off of it completely.
Yeah.
But I thought this was a fine enough season. It served the role of what most sequels do. And let's wait and see what's coming out. So that's Stranger Things 2.
Yeah, let us know what you all thought of it in the comments as well.
Yeah.
Most people seem pretty high on it. Some people are really high on it. I don't want to say I was disappointed because I honestly wasn't expecting much. I was afraid it was going to be worse than it was.
Yeah.
I was afraid like, they're going to kind of...
the magic would run out.
Yeah, and they were able to like keep up the energy enough, I think, to make it considered success.
Yeah, they delivered an end product that I enjoyed, and they didn't blow my mind, but they did give me an enjoyable time and made me want to watch it all the way through. So hopefully they continue with at least that baseline in the upcoming seasons, but maybe they can take it out in further direction. So I think that'll ramp up our discussion of Stranger Things 2. And if you're listening to us via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review for us. It helps other people find the podcast. You can follow us on social media, on our Instagram accounts. Make sure to follow us there. It's HBTVS_official. That is where we post pictures about what we're doing on the upcoming podcast. I'm going to try to start doing more Instagram stories and playing around with that some. So keep an eye on that. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. You can find all the links, everything on housebyvideostore.com. And we have 2 newer short films out. So you have After the Slasher and Pluck that both got released in the month of October that you can find on the website or find links to them on our YouTube or our Facebook page. So you can check those out if you haven't already. And then as we work on any upcoming projects, we'll probably have news about that on our Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So make sure to follow those. And then if you want to follow us specifically on the internet, so I have updated my Twitter account is now just at William Caps, my name. So you can follow me there. I don't tweet a lot. I think it's better just to follow our Instagram account because I'm going to start using that more because there's some pictures I took of the Jack-o'-lantern Spectacular, which is this thing in Louisville, Kentucky, where there's 5,000 pumpkins that are carved. Some of them are just normal jack-o'-lantern faces, but a lot of them are very intricate, artistic design where they bring in artists to do them. And they had ones of different scenarios, like dinosaurs, and they had one of from Nosferatu, and they had an X-Men section that Derek would have liked, and they had a bunch of different stuff there. So you can on our Instagram, so I posted pictures of that. And then too, we have new camera gear every now and then. Maybe we'll start doing some just kind of test videos and throwing footage on there just to show stuff off. I might start doing that more. Just try and get back into the habit of editing and cutting stuff and color grading. But yes, make sure to follow us on Instagram. Yeah, my personal account on Twitter, you can follow it, not. I don't tweet that lot or tweet that much, so that's not as important.
Yep. So next week, we're not sure what we're doing, right?
Yeah, so I think if you're listening to this, we're recording it on Monday, November 6th, and I don't know. So I'm going to be out of town. So
this weekend?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm out of town through the 13th. So I think as of right now, there will not be an episode in this upcoming week. That would be the 14th, Tuesday the 14th. There will not be an episode, so we will not have anything coming out then, just because timing didn't work out and all that stuff. But we will follow us on social media. We will announce what upcoming topic will be on the podcast after that. As I said, so there will not be a podcast on the 14th of November just because of timing and everything like that. But we shall be back after that, and we will announce what we're covering on either Facebook or Instagram, so follow us there. But that'll bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.